Kentucky Derby was marred by an obstruction penalty that sent the presumed winner to the back. The winner of the Belmont also made contact with another horse, but no objection was filed, and maybe that's because both horses have the same trainer. The 151st running of the Belmont didn't bring us a controversies like a disqualification or a riderless horse running around the track. Instead, we had somewhat of a shocking end. Sir Winston, who hadn't won a race all year, coming from off the pace, taking the lead down the stretch. His owners actually named him after the former British Prime Minister, and there he was, winning the Belmont, just 2 days after we celebrated the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Sir Winston winning by a length over Tacitus and returning $22.40 on a $2 bet. All right, so let's take a closer look at what happened in this race. The editor of Thoroughbred Daily News, Joe Bianca, joins us once again. Joe, good to have you in studio once again. All right, great move coming around the corner on that final stretch here. But for him, was the best move the fact that he stayed on the inside and he saved ground all the way to the end?
For sure. This was one of those situations. It's a prime example of why trips matter in horse racing, because the runner-up, Tacitus, was wide around both turns, and Sir Winston saved ground, like you said, around both turns, and he was able to move up several spots midway on the far turn and get that, we call it an inside-out trip in racing, because you want to be inside to save ground on the turns, and then you want to tip out at the top of the stretch so you stay in the clear. And that's kind of the trip he got. Whereas Tacitus was wide around both turns, he probably carried a lot more ground, he ran a lot more feet than Sir Winston, and this was the tale of two trips.
Okay, so that gray horse on the outside right now in second actually is Tacitus. You see him running on the outside. He was the betting line favorite. He stayed out the entire way. This is Jose Ortiz's home track. How does he justify the path that he took to Belmont the trainer?
It's a tough thing because you can only do so much when you have that outside draw. You know, it's not that long of a run to the first turn.
It seemed like he had a lot of opportunities to slide in, though.
Yeah, I mean, potentially. He had War of Will to his inside, and War of Will was trying to keep him out for a little bit, because I think the jockey in War of Will knew his main, or thought his main competition was Tacitus, so I think he was trying to keep him out a little bit. But I think that the wide post kind of came back to bite him, and in the end, it's what made the difference.
Now, this race certainly could have had some controversy at the end. Sir Winston bumping War of Will. Both horses have the same trainer, but if not, would there have at least been grounds for an objection?
I think so. I think in a normal race with normal circumstances, I think they would have at least taken a look at it.
Especially with what we saw in the Kentucky Derby.
Definitely, yeah. There's a little bit more sensitivity to that kind of thing now. But I think the main difference was that in the Derby, the incident happened as they're about to turn into the stretch, as they're about to corner, whereas this happened once they got into the stretch, and War of Will at that point seemed to be kind of out of gas. So I think even if they had looked at it, they would have left the result as it was, just because this was later in the race and it was more apparent what the result was going to be.
I think you hit on it right there, because War of Will did not respond to his jockey when his jockey was asking for something down the stretch. Is that more of a signifier of a horse feeling the effects of racing all three Triple Crown races?
I think it might be. I think it's also the mile and a half. You know, these 3-year-olds, it's a rarity now for 3-year-olds to race this long distance. And I think that a lot of horses just hit the wall in the Belmont. And I think maybe he was a little over the top because he had such a busy schedule going into the race, but I think it also could just be that he doesn't want to go that far. So it's tough to pinpoint, but he definitely was out of gas in the stretch.
Yeah, and we've seen that quite a bit, obviously, in recent years, and maybe it's the way that these horses are bred, maybe it's the way that these horses are trained, but apart from American Pharoah and Justified, the last 19 horses to have competed in all three Triple Crown races finished worse in the Belmont than they did in the Preakness.
Mm-hmm.
What is that telling you?
I mean, it's just they're trained differently than they used to be. Horses generally are babied a little bit more now, and that's why the Triple Crown is such an oddity, and why it's so hard to conquer, because never again will these horses have to run 3 races at these kind of distances in a 5-week span. So I think it's so tough, and that's why it makes it so special when a horse is able to climb that mountain and take the Triple Crown. And it's a reason that it didn't happen for 37 years.
Yeah, there's a reason for it. It's because, these horses, it seems like, are being trained in a different manner. They're being trained for speed, for the shorter races, and now all of a sudden you throw something the length of the Belmont at them. they've never seen something at this length.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to ask, like, especially like you said, if they start early as 2-year-olds, which is kind of more of the trend now. They want to start these horses early on and try to go for the 2-year-old championship, and then maybe see what they do as a 3-year-old. There's more racing, but they race less frequently.
Right, yeah, it's almost like a lighter schedule for them, even though that they're actually in more races.
Yeah.
This clearly could have been a great race because I think if we saw more of the best 3-year-olds in the nation out there, they would have showed up. It would have been a little bit different. We talked a little bit about the horses being trained differently. Because this schedule is so daunting, because you're racing 3 times in 5 weeks, should the Triple Crown maybe make an adjustment?
Well, it's funny because there's been talk of that, and there was talk of that for that 37-year gap between Triple Crown winners, where it seemed pretty apparent that this was becoming too difficult, especially with the way horses are trained now. And then that kind of fell by the wayside once American Pharoah won, and then 3 years later Justify won. I think it's I liken it to March Madness a little bit. You know, it's not quite the fairest result because it's single elimination, but it's about being able to put those 6 games together and come out on top in the end. It might not get you the best horse in the winner's circle every time, but it's enough of a unique challenge that I don't think they should mess with it.
I know a lot of traditionalists would certainly frown on that, but a lot of baseball traditionalists hated the idea of moving from 154 games to 162, or NFL from 14 to 16 games, because it messes up some of the stats. Now that horses are being trained differently, they're physically a different horse than we saw 45, 50 years ago. Shouldn't the sport make an adjustment?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like trainers and owners have made adjustments, because the only horse this year to run in all 3 was War of Will. And there was actually the horse who beat Sir Winston in the previous race would have been probably one of the top choices of the Belmont, but they didn't like coming back on such short notice, and they're pointing for other races. There's a lot more other options in the summer and the fall for these 3-year-olds that I think it just kind of sorts itself out. You know, the cream rises to the top, and the horses that can really handle it prove themselves to be special, like Justify and American Pharoah, and the rest of them kind of just fall into the pack.
Right. It might be another 37 years before we see more horses win the Triple Crown, but the achievement, I guess you're right, that makes that achievement even more special in that way. All right, 3-year-old horse of the year. It's really wide open at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
so who's got the leg up?
I would say that War of Will has a slight leg up, because he does have the Preakness win, and prior to the Derby, he had a couple of graded stakes wins before that, and Maximum Security had the previous win, the Florida Derby win. Then he got DQ'd in the Derby, so technically he finished 17th in the Derby. So he's behind War of Will. Didn't show up to the Preakness or the Belmont. He could have bolstered his case there, didn't do it. Instead, he's pointing towards the Haskell at Monmouth. I would say War of Will is slightly in front, just because the other 2 winners of the 2 classics, the Derby and the Belmont, Country House hadn't won a race until the Derby. Sir Winston hadn't won a race this year until the Derby. So War of Will has done enough to be in front right now, but it is up in the air, and there's a lot still to be decided.
You would almost think that maybe they should get extra points just for being able to compete in all 3 of the Triple Crown races.
Yeah, I mean, you have to tip your hat to him. Even if he didn't run that well today, just showing up and competing, and when others had the chance to and didn't, I think he got to give him a lot of credit.
That's right. Showing that kind of heart, that courageousness, should actually give you a couple extra bonus points as well. They've certainly changed the scoring system on what it takes to get into the Kentucky Derby, so maybe they should take a closer look at what it takes to win the Horse of the Year award, too.
Yeah, I mean, and there's going to be lots of other opportunities for him and the other 3-year-olds later in the year, but it's an inexact science.
I know.
There's just...
It's opinion-based.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, there's voters who have their own biases, so it's there's a lot to be decided for sure.
Well, next up this summer, the Haskell, the Travers. Are we going to see Maximum Security, Country House, and War of Will?
Country House is a little different, just because he came down with that fever, and who knows, there might be other complications that force him to have a later start. I think at this point, everybody starts looking at the Travers. The Travers is the big summer race. The Haskell's up there too, and Maximum Security is going to run in there because that's his backyard. He's stabled at Monmouth Park, so he makes sense for him to go there. But I think this is the time of the year where everybody starts to have eyes at the Travers to really have that statement win to start off the second half of the year.
It has been a really interesting Triple Crown this year,
really has.
and it still feels like something is yet to be decided as to which horse we should be touting as the best horse out there. So it's going to be fun, I guess, to see that Travers and the Haskell continues to pass that torch, I guess. You can get all of his insights in Thoroughbred Daily News. Joe Bianca, great insights. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
We're back at